Welcome back. Well, from Russia's takeover of Crimea to a National Security Administration's domestic spying, our country's leaders are facing some tough decisions and changes in the midst of a midterm election year. Earlier, our own Mike Barker caught up with recently re-elected Congressman Mike Conaway to catch up on some of the big issues he'll be weighing in on behalf of the Permian Basin.
All right. Congressman, Washington has been enacting sanctions against Russia, began today over this crisis in the Ukraine. How do you stand on this? What do you think needs to be done? You're involved in this by virtue of your membership in the Armed Services Committee.
Well, the president did announce some limited sanctions against some certain individuals, which is a pretty weak response, quite frankly. The seeds for our weak response were sown in the first couple of years of the president's administration when he decided to acquiesce to Putin and not build the missile defense system in Poland and did some other things where I think Putin got his bluff in on the president, and so consequently today we're in a really horrible circumstance. The House has passed two bills overwhelmingly, by the way. One that would guarantee $1 billion loan to the Ukraine to help them with some financial issues they've got going on, and another one just simply to let Putin know in no uncertain terms that we disagree with his approach to what he's doing.
What does Mike Conaway think needs to be done?
Well, we need stronger sanctions. The problem with the sanctions is that the Europeans are beholden to Russia for natural gas deliveries, and there's some leverage there that they're not wanting to put on the table. So we have limited response at this point. And so put more sanctions are it. I think the diplomatic approach that the president's going to, I wish he had a better hand to play. I wish he was held in better regard by Putin, but like I said earlier, he's not. And that's his direct result of the way he's conducted himself the first 4 years. And so this president has got to do this, and he did lay the groundwork well when he first did his apology tour across this country, or across the world.
Let's put the president aside and everything. Let's talk about what you feel needs to be done in this situation. Would you, if you could call the shots and say, this is what we're going to do in Russia, what would you do?
Sanctions. Try the diplomatic side. We should have a better position to play, a stronger hand to play, but we don't. And so economic sanctions will affect the Russians. First step to do is we can lift the oil embargo or lift the restrictions that don't allow the United States to export crude oil. That's a symbolic nature because we're still, for the next couple of years, we'll be using more than we can produce, but nevertheless, tell the world that. Began the process of expediting the approval of LNG export terminals. We've got 2 of them underway right now. It's a 3-year project to get those done, but nevertheless tell the world that we're going to try to supply Europe with crude, with natural gas so that they're not as beholden to the Russians on that regard. Strengthen NATO and their resolve, because it will not be too long until Putin tries his exact same thing with a NATO country. He will foment unrest in a nation that's one of the NATO partners, one of the former Soviet countries, and he will then use Russian troops, as he did in Georgia in 2008 and in Crimea this past couple of weeks, to do that to a NATO country, and then he's going to test NATO. So this guy is not going to stop where he's at, and we need to do everything we can to make that happen.
Let's talk about this guy. Senator John McCain last week characterized Putin as an egomaniac, a wacko. What do you think?
Well, he's a former KGB guy. He's a megalomaniac. He wants to recreate the Soviet Union's influence, the old Soviet Union influence in the world. He wants to, gather up those territories and have Russia have the same role in the world of politics that the old Soviet Union did, and that's his goal and his intent. He's been pretty clear about it. It's not very subtle in his approach, and he's a fellow who respects strength. He respects resolve, and right now he doesn't respect the United States.
Think he's dangerous?
Yes.
Why?
He put troops in the Crimea, the international law. He's broken his agreements with the UN on how Crimea is supposed to be treated. He parachuted Russian troops into Ukraine's sovereign territory over the weekend to take over a gas plant there. He's a dangerous fellow. In 2008, he invaded Georgia, a sovereign nation. He still has Russian troops in South Ossetia and another province there in Georgia. So he is not a nice guy.
Congressman, you know that there are a lot of folks out there, a lot of Americans concerned about the fact that their telephone numbers, their telephone calls, all of that, the possibility that they could be overheard or tapped into. A lot of us feel like that we don't have any private life anymore, that people are being invaded. Is that something that's a real concern?
Well, it's a concern, but it's not happening. Yes, the metadata is being collected, but it's currently being collected by phone companies anyway. That's that's how they used to bill. Remember the good old days when you paid for the length of time of any one call? Well, that's not exactly how the billing thing does this day, but nevertheless, that metadata, the phone number, the time of the call, and the phone number you called, and the length of the call, that's it. There's no content collected. So the only way to listen in on a phone is to have an active wiretap on that phone and be listening. This other information, they don't have active wiretaps, and so you can't be listening, and no content is collected, even so that later, if you needed to find out who called whom, you knew what they've said. That data is not collected and stored. So there's a lot of misinformation. I think it's instructive that not one NSA employee has been shown to have done anything wrong that we didn't already know about, and taken steps to punish them in those regards. So the NSA is acting within the way it's supposed to. It's not doing much of what the inflammatory information that comes out initially, and those stories always get walked back to what the truth is. And I understand what the Guardian is doing and what you guys in the media are doing. They hype this, get everybody excited, and then when the truth comes out,
emotional.
It is. It's so it's interesting. Jimmy Fallon had a deal on the other night where he talked about Mark Zuckerberg is harassing the president about gathering information about So this is a guy that has Facebook, who's interested in what you had for breakfast, what you had for lunch, who you call, in all aspects of your life, what your favorite things are, who your friends are, all this guys. This guy makes a living collecting all of that personal information that you put out there on Facebook, and he's worried about something the federal government. So it's a bit ironic that a guy who reads your emails, reads your tag, all that kind of stuff. This guy's doing it and gleaning from that things to sell you and to pitch information to you and for advertisers, that he's somehow worried that knowing the number of the call, all this kind of stuff. So it's a legitimate conversation to have, legitimate concerns the American people have. We're all concerned about our privacies.
And that is all we have for today's Closer Look. Stay tuned for the CBS7 News at 5. Have a great evening.